I'm here, so.
I'm Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, and I'm down to dunk.
Howdy, Oklahoma.
My name is Chet Holmgren, and I'm down to dunk.
Dead gum.
I'm Josh Giddey, and I'm down to dunk.
This is Lou Dort, and I'm down to dunk.
Is that like you eat them together?
Everybody tells him to get the bag of burgers.
I need like a straw.
Howdy. I'm an artist on the court.
This is Jay Will, and I'm down to dunk.
My name is Kenrich Williams, and I'm down to dunk.
It might be Aaron Wiggins.
This is a troll. It's a troll. I'm trolling. Howdy, partner.
Because I think it would take away from who he is, you know? Yeah.
I love Oklahoma. I love Oklahoma to death.
This is Lou Dort, and I'm down to Dort.
Perfect. Very good.
I like the hat.
You like the hat?
Vava.
This is J-Dub, and I'm down to dunk. I've been doing a lot of dunking.
Good evening, Down to Dunk listeners. It is a Tuesday night. This is the Wednesday pod. Andrew's not here. He's on another one of his trips, another one of his vacations with his family, having a great time. But that's okay, because we've got from the Fry Pod, it's Jay. Jay, how's it going?
It's good to be here. I haven't been on I've been on like 2 podcasts in the entire summer. And so I told Andrew last week, I was like, hey, because I'm going to miss this Friday as well. And I said, hey, if you need like content throughout the week, I can at least jump on. And this is what he came up with. And so I'm excited.
Are you going on a trip too?
Just a quick, like kind of not even a conference, just like a day trip to Tulsa, but it's overnight, Thursday night through Friday mid-afternoon. So
you hear that, Down to Dunkers? If you're in Tulsa, Jay will be there.
Yeah, we
doing a live pod.
Yeah, sure. By myself. No, I don't know. We've tried to do like online, like the 3 of them and one online person, and it barely works with the 3 of them together. And so adding an online podcast, it just makes it, or a voice is a little more challenging.
That's true. Because I can remember with the a podcast 1000, I woke up at like 4 a.m. to join you and absolutely regretted it. Was not worth it. I wish I had stayed asleep, because it's just impossible to have a conversation with 4 people who are in a room together.
Yeah, we already talk over each other too much, probably in person. But if you throw somebody on that's like just virtual, it's nearly impossible.
So before we get to some more over-unders, we did have some Thunder adjacent news today. Keontae Johnson got a 2-way deal with the Hornets, who have been collecting all of the former Thunder players. They now, they don't have Poku technically anymore, but they did have him for a short time. They've got Micic, they've got Trey Mann, and now they've got Keontae Johnson, who played with Trey Mann in college. So good for them. You think there's any chance? Who's next in the pipeline? Who's next in the Thunder to Hornet pipeline?
It has to be
in their future.
It's Usman. It has to be. It has to be. I think Charlotte is the appropriate like last stop for what was the Thunder doing draft picks. So it's maybe gone.
What if they're like super into last year's G League championship team? They're like, we've got to get those guys. I think that they're watching that and they're like, I think that team could be an NBA team.
It's like Olivier Sarr. I know he's got a torn Achilles, but let's just get him on the roster. Yeah,
let him rehab for a year.
Doesn't even go back to. Jeremy Lamb went from Oklahoma City. I don't think the Thunder traded him to the Hornets, but.
No, but also another one I was thinking of was Byron Mullins was on that 2011 Charlotte Bobcats team, and Raymond Felton. That was a kind of a reverse one because he started there, ended up.
It's a lot of
OKC.
connections.
A lot of connections. And what
Gordon
a great
Hayward?
franchise to have a connection too. Yeah, Gordon Hayward, he's another reverse one. I mean, I guess that's just they made a trade with each other.
that just yeah. All the guys.
Wow, isn't that weird? Okay, so I mean, good for Keontae. He has a much better shot of playing for the Charlotte Hornets than he does with the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Right. Did you? I mean, did you watch enough of him to really
Not
get
really.
impressed?
No,
I like
mean,
his story. Obviously, like he was had some sort of heart episode, right? On when he was with Florida.
Yeah.
Had to get like a year. He recovered for a year and had to get doctor's clearance. And I think he finished his career at Kansas State. I like the idea of like super physical, athletic guy, but I mean, I don't know. Where's he ever going to break into this team?
Yeah, it's tough. And actually, that's a great lead-in to the first team. Now, this as this happened last week, Jay has picked 3 teams that he's interested in talking about. I've picked 3 teams I'm interested in talking about. We'll go back and forth. And this team I want to start with, because I think that question of like, a lot of young guys, how are you going to play all these guys? The Houston Rockets, who last season, 41-41, their over-under was 31.5. Technically not a surprise team. Technically not. They needed to get to 42 wins to be a surprise team, so they are not in that group. Sorry for them. Their over-under this year, 43.5. So they need to increase their win total by 3 to hit 44 wins. Key additions, Reed Shepherd, 3rd pick in the draft, looked very good in Summer League. Steven Adams, technically, because, I mean, they did trade for him last February, but he didn't play. So he's coming back. That seems significant if he's healthy. And then they also traded for AJ Griffin, who once upon a time was someone that a lot of draft people liked. And just, it's amazing. His story is pretty wild because, like, he had a pretty good rookie season. Like, pretty promising, shot the ball really well, and then just disappeared from the rotation.
I wonder if him and Quinn Snyder got out of kind of not on the same page, or if it was Jalen Johnson played him off the floor. Isn't that who the kid that came up kind of from Atlanta and just really had a great season for them?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. It's like Jalen Johnson. Dude, I am in such, I'll just be very frank with you. I'm way more in OU football mode right now than I am NBA mode, just because it fills up the time.
Understandable.
But yeah, so I don't know. I don't know what to think about AJ Griffin.
Key losses, really no one. All their main guys are back. Tari Eason, who missed a lot of time last year, assuming he's going to be back and he'll be healthy. So what piqued your interest about the Houston Rockets? I feel like there's a lot, but anything specific?
I mean, the first part is just my disdain for the franchise in general.
Yeah.
And so it makes me want to talk about them. But the hard part is like, I think I'm going to hit the over on this. The only thing that makes me pause on the over is the fact that the Western Conference is once again pretty loaded. I mean, outside of Portland and Utah, I mean, really is everybody else. I mean, you could debate on San Antonio. We'll probably talk about them here in a little bit, but I think Houston, I mean, I know it's probably not real, but if Steven Adams can play, like him and Şengün playing some minutes together, like I think that could be helpful as far as kind of the defensive side of that. Although they'd be really slow. I'm intrigued to see what Reed Shepherd does. I think the thing that makes me pause the most about them, and probably why I was the most intrigued by them, is Jalen Green kind of contract year. Like, what is that going to look like for
Honestly,
a guy?
I think it's going to look a lot like it's looked so far.
But I'm just like,
he has played like it's a contract year.
That's the truth. But it's like, is he going to try to get his? Is he going to play within the system?
Yes.
I like. Yes. I mean, I know we probably know the answer to those questions, but they did have moments throughout last year where they looked like a really normal team. Like, I think Jabari Smith had a fantastic second year. As much as I don't like Dylan Brooks, like he's kind of brought some of the grit that he does to Houston. Ime Udoka. I just think there's a lot of positives. If I was a Houston fan, I would feel far more optimistic, obviously, than I did 2 years ago when Steven Silas was there and they had zero identity or plan. But I don't know. I'm intrigued. I don't know what Reed Shepherd does. I know we talked a little bit about that just before. A lot of summer league hype, but some really smart basketball draft people were high on Reed Shepherd. What position does he play? Where does he play? Is he in the starting lineup? What do you do with Jalen Green? Like, there's a lot of questions around this team, and I think that's why I would probably hesitate a little bit. But I like kind of what I saw from them last year, and I think some of the addition, well, Reed Shepherd specifically, and if they can get 50 games out of Steve, which I don't even know if he's going to play at all, but if they could do that, I think that they would have a pretty good shot to hit that over. But barely, not a ton, but barely.
Yeah, there's a few things I find very interesting about them. One is I didn't really recognize as much as I should have how important Fred VanVleet was to their overall success last year. I was on PBP stats, just doing 2-man on-offs with Fred VanVleet and anyone on the team. And it is incredible how big the swings are when Fred VanVleet is on the floor versus when he's off. Like, just as an example, just as an example, Fred VanVleet and Jabari Smith on the court together, the net rating is about 0. Like, it's slightly negative. When Fred VanVleet leaves the court and it's just Jabari Smith Jr. on, it's a -5. You do it with Şengün. When they were on the court together last year, they were a +3.36. That's great. When Fred VanVleet left the court, they were a -12. Now, that was only 371 minutes. They played a lot of their minutes together. But every single player, it seems like you go through, and it just didn't hit me last year because, to be perfectly honest, I wasn't watching a lot of the Rockets. But that addition was so key to them getting to 500 last year. And why that is interesting to me is because I think if you're I don't know how Rockets fans feel, but I know how I feel about their backcourt. And I feel like Amen Thompson and Reed Shepherd is probably the backcourt of the future. It makes sense for them to fit together. You know, Reed like crazy shooting kind of helps against Amen. Amen has crazy athleticism. Amen's a great defender already. Even as a rookie, he was a really good defender. So I kind of like that pairing. And yet there are these two guys in front of them. One who's, a really good vet, Fred VanVleet. And then this Jalen Green question that I just feel like they need to move past this Jalen Green question. I know that there are defenders. I know he had like a great 20 games in Mickey Mouse March, and that's awesome. I think that they have so many really good young talents, like blue chip talents, that
Right.
I want to see get the opportunity, and I just don't know how they do it.
Surely, if you're a Rockets fan, wouldn't you rather see, like you just listed Amen Thompson, you'd rather see him play over Jalen Green this year, right?
I would, because that type of player, like, you got to give him the opportunity to figure out what he is. Like, yeah, I do think he could be a really good, like, role player off the bench who comes in, gives you crazy energy, really good defensive player, really good passer. Like, he can be really interesting off the bench, but I think there is, like, significant upside there. But to find that upside, like, you got to play him, like, a lot of minutes. And so I just don't know. And going back to, and I've mentioned this before, but, at the beginning of OKC's tank, me and Andrew talked a lot about, like, you get all these picks so that you can take all these shots and, just take the best player available, just take the guy who falls, who shouldn't be falling, like, just grab that guy. And that's not what the Thunder did, because they had this other idea about how they wanted to construct their team, but that's absolutely what Houston did. And I think some of the criticisms of OKC back in the day was like, how are they going to play all these guys? How are they going to play all these picks? It's turned out that it hasn't really mattered at all. Like, I guess to their credit or not, they've drafted enough busts or just guys who just haven't worked out that question just hasn't really mattered. Yeah, there's a guy here or there that we wish were getting a few more minutes, but in general, season to season, it's kind of always worked out. And the guys who aren't getting minutes, you kind of get it. If I'm a Houston fan and I'm looking at guys like Reed Shepherd, Amen Thompson, Cam Whitmore, those three guys, any one of those three guys, think about how many NBA teams, any of those three, would be like the top young talent on that team. It's probably like 10 to 15 teams in the league where that if any one of those three, that would be like their best young player. And part of that is because there's a lot of teams like Milwaukee, for instance, it just doesn't have any young players. A team like Brooklyn, like that would be obvious. He'd be their best young player. Even a team like Portland, who does have young players, I think at least a couple of those guys would be their best young player on the team. And yet I don't see like the clear path. How are we going to fully investigate like all of these players? Because they all kind of deserve it. And so that's the reason why I look at this over under and like I absolutely think they could do it. But I'm hoping, and I'm going to take a slight under because I'm hoping that they're going to experiment more with playing some of these young guys with super high upside and maybe pull back on the vets just a little bit. I know that's not what Udoka wants to do. And so I'm not going to be shocked if, like Reed Shepherd's playing 8 minutes a game, in December. But I think they have so much talent, young talent on their team. And I think they have to let it blossom. They've got to let it blossom. And I just don't feel like they're going to do it.
Yeah, I think you just have like what you're seeing in Houston is this tension of like difference in GM's kind of maybe intention with the team and the ownership's intention with the team. It's like they're trying to straddle this line of being able to play. And they've been mediocre for a long time. I get all of those things. But having this kind of hybrid team of some older vets that need minutes, Van Fleet, Dylan Brooks, kind of those weird guys. And then you're right. Like then you don't have the minutes to spare to get Amen Thompson those opportunities to learn. And the other thing is you hired a coach that's he's not a build up a new team coach. He's a established coach that just a year before, were they in the finals with him or at least the Eastern Conference finals or got close? And so it just feels like they're caught in kind of this in between. And I do think they've been rumored for the entire last 2 years to be star hunting, and they do some draft assets. And, some of them, I think one of the moves they made with the Nets this summer to get a Phoenix pick in the future, like could they move Jalen Green and get somebody? I don't know what the value of Jalen Green would be at this point. It feels a little like Josh Giddey-esque in the sense of, I would say Jalen Green has a higher value than Josh did.
You kind of have to find like the perfect storm though, in the way that they did with Chicago and Giddey, where you got to find that team that really values him more than maybe the majority of the teams in the league.
Yeah, or just as poorly run like the Bulls. So it's like there's two options. You have to be desperate and have no idea what you're doing, a la Bulls, or just have the perfect fit. And so I like Brooklyn is one, but I'm like,
I know. Can you imagine Jalen Green and Cam Thomas?
Yeah, that's all I could think of. Is like they're almost redundant. Like Cam Thomas is not quite as good Jalen Green, but they could use Houston with Cam Johnson or even Dorian Finney-Smith. Like that would make a lot of sense for them. And what would the draft capital have to be? And then you have to have, I think any GM has to have a little bit of a ability to kind of swallow their pride to get rid of what was Jalen Green? Number 2 pick overall?
Yeah.
And so that would be, and I don't know, is that Raphael Stone? Is that his name?
Yeah.
Was that his draft pick?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm like, there's got to be some of that in there, but I think you're right. You've identified one of the major issues is they have a little bit of a traffic jam on the backcourt. And so I could see one of them get moved.
Like Dylan Brooks, like the idea that he's going to be playing 31 minutes a night. When I feel like Amen Thompson can like replicate a lot of what he can do defensively. I realize that he cannot shoot. I actually read a really interesting article about him, but I was reminded that he shot like 14% from 3 in his rookie season. He took 58 threes, and apparently like 11 of them were air balls. So like, I get it. It's, he cannot shoot, but I just want them to invest more in these young guys. And I don't want them to make a consolidation trade before they know what they have. And I just don't feel like they know what they have with the new young guys, whereas they've given so much time to Jalen Green. I kind of feel like we know. Okay, that was way too much time on Houston, so we're going to do a really quick one, which is the Brooklyn Nets, a team I wanted to talk about. 19.5 over-under. Last season, 32-50, 37.5 over under last year. Key additions, Bojan Bogdanovic, Zaire Williams, Shake Milton, and a new coach, Jordi Fernandez. And then they lost Mikal Bridges, Lonnie Walker, Dennis Smith Jr. I'm going under. This team, thankfully, has finally picked a lane. Credit to them. They got an incredible deal for Mikal Bridges. They are maybe more than any other team other than Washington is going into the season like focused on the tank. Yep. And I just feel like they have more levers to pull. We're going back to lever talk. They could pull as you mentioned, the Cam Johnson lever. They could do that. Dorian Finney-Smith lever. There's a lot of levers they have left to make this team much, much worse. And pretty much every season, there is a team that wins in the teens, and sometimes there's multiple. Like last year, I think there were 2 teams that were in the teens. And so even though 19.5 is really low, I respect whoever makes these over-unders for finally doing it, because last year I was upset that like the lowest over-under was like 22.5, and then every team above that was like 28.5. It's very annoying. There has to be bad teams. We know right now, today, that Brooklyn wants to be bad. And so for me, even though it's low, it's an easy under for me.
Yeah.
Give me the under.
They're going to be last year. The Wizards won 15 and the Pistons won 14.
Yeah.
The next one was the Trailblazers at 21. They have every incentive to lose. Getting their draft pick back for 2025. Not what they made in the deal with
Houston.
The Rockets. They got their pick back this year, and I would go all in on Cooper Flagg or whoever else can fall in those top 3. There's no reason for them to win. Fire sale, get as many assets as you can, make it make sense, and move forward. And so I would hammer the under for sure.
Yeah, and the nice thing about their position is we mentioned they do have those vets. Like they could start collecting some young players from other teams in the same way that OKC did early on. And sometimes those guys, most of the time, those guys don't work out. Like they traded for Zaire Williams. He's probably not good at basketball. He probably won't be in the NBA in a couple of years. But why not take a flyer? Who cares? Like you might as well see if you can find anything there. They have a couple young guys, but their young player pool is pretty weak right now. It's like Derek Whitehead. Jalen Wilson is probably the most exciting one. Noah Clowney.
Nick Claxton. Like I don't know.
It's still Nick Claxton. I guess he's 25 already. He just signed his new deal. So yeah, I still feel like there's plenty of room to like bring in some more young guys, see what you can find, and just having a season of exploration. I think this will be a very fun tanking season for a fan base that is probably exhausted going back to like the KG trade. Everything since then has just been exhausting. Because even when they were in this position the last time, like when that whole thing blew up, they didn't have any picks. So they were having to like scrounge around, and they built that D-Lo team that made it to the playoffs the one time. And that was like so exciting. This time they actually have real assets. They have a real incentive, and they're doing it in a year of like an incredible draft class. So I'm just very happy for their fans that after more than a decade of frustration, they finally have a real path.
Has there ever been a team that had a top 3 draft lottery odds and also a top 3 scorer in the NBA?
Oh, you're thinking Cam Thomas. I mean, that legitimately
he may score 35 a game with 14 wins.
I mean, because last year he was at 22.5. I bet he could get to like 27.5 easily.
It's that old, somebody has to score the points. And if they keep just, moving guys away, and probably like, I think it could be attested to that him scoring a lot of points is directly connected to them losing. Like,
yeah, I think he could be like an all-time tank commander. And if they trade for Jalen Green, that would be, his on-offs last year, Basketball Reference, a -6.8 when he was on the court as opposed to when he was off. So, I think this could be like a legendary tank commander season for him.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next team. That was pretty short. That was good. That was good by me. Let's do another terrible team that you picked. The Detroit Pistons. Detroit basketball. Over under is 24.5. First of all, right off the bat, let me say, that sounds like doable. Like 24 and a half. Okay. Like no big deal. The last time Detroit won 25 games, Paul George was the leading scorer on the Thunder. KD was in Golden State. That is the last time they won 25 games. Okay. You think that these last 5 years have been bad? You don't even realize how bad it's been. They did not win 25 games in any of those previous 5 seasons. 25. They never got to 25. They never got to 24. Their highest win total over these last 5 years was 23 wins. So you have to go all the way back to the Raptors winning the championship when Detroit won more than 24 games. Okay.
I mean, that
last
feels like
season,
that was an eternity ago.
I know. Can you imagine being a fan of that team?
Oh,
5 seasons of that.
I probably
half a
would have
decade.
quit.
You think you would have quit?
I
Picked a
don't
new
know if I
team
could
or
have
just quit the entire sport.
just
quit
so
the
we can
league.
move on.
I'm done.
Like I'll be a Red Wings fan and a Tigers, I guess. Lions.
Lions. Last season, 14 and 68. Their over under was 28.5. And so they halved that. What was interesting about that over under last year, it was the most bet over in the preseason, 28.5. The most bet over. And just as a reminder, their starting lineup, game 1, featured Killian Hayes. Killian Hayes was in the starting lineup. Asar Thompson, a rookie who can't shoot. Killian Hayes can't shoot. Jalen Duren, second-year player, can't shoot. Cade Cunningham, and Beef Stew. That was their starting 5. And that was the most bet over?
It was all Monty Williams. He convinced everybody. It's the most. There needs to be a documentary about how he just fleeced the Pistons. Because to throw out that top 5 is like, I mean, just the most absurd attempt to say, I told you I didn't really want to do this. So
the funniest
here's
part,
your
though,
squad.
Is that they start 2-1. And they actually, their 4th game was against the Thunder, and they didn't win another game for however many, it was 28 games or whatever. But yeah, he probably felt vindicated. He was like, yeah, we're going to play smash mouth basketball. We're 2-1. They were probably like the 6th seed in the East at that time.
Golly.
So their key additions, a lot of guys. Tobias Harris, Tim Hardaway Jr., not just a lot of guys, a lot of names you've heard. Tim Hardaway Jr., Malik Beasley, Paul Reed, B-Ball Paul, and Ron Holland, their top 5 pick. And they also have a new coach, JB Bickerstaff, previously with the Cavs. Key losses. It's hard to say a key loss from a 14-win team, so these are just some names. Evan Fournier, James Wiseman, key loss. Quentin Grimes, Malachi Flynn, and Troy Brown Jr. So 24.5. Can they break the curse, Jay, and get to 25 wins?
So I feel like I'm buying the fool's gold again.
Whoa.
They just make they make a little more sense.
They definitely have shooting. Like between Tim Hardaway Jr., who, by the way, Mavs fans hated last year. I'm thrilled to get rid of him.
Harris, who Sixers fans hated
Sixers fans hated him last year. Malik Beasley, he was a minimum. I guess Bucks fans were okay with him.
Yeah,
but yes, they have collected. He is a good shooter. They have collected some hated shooters from their former fan bases, but they all can theoretically shoot. I mean, I think Tobias Harris was like a 35% shooter last year, but Tim Hardaway Jr. he took I was actually looking at their per 100 attempts. Tobias Harris, this is one of the issues with Tobias Harris. He actually doesn't shoot as much as you want him to. Per 100 possessions, he only took a little over 5 threes per game. In comparison, Tim Hardaway Jr. took over 13. So like Tim Hardaway Jr. is a shooter. He's going to shoot the ball. He's going to help their spacing. Same with Malik Beasley. We'll see about Tobias Harris. He might be like a really nasty fantasy pick because he'll probably get stats, but it will be disgusting and you'll never want to watch a game. So you're going over.
His best seasons as a 3-point shooter were in his 3 seasons in Detroit.
Oh, really? Okay. So maybe there's
Yeah.
some juice there.
No, that's not true. It's the 2 years with
Okay,
the
not
Clippers. I just missed that
All
number.
right.
But it's not actually even that close. He was 42.6% from the three-point line for the Clippers.
Yeah. Those definitely were his best seasons. I mean, the
Good
Sixers
Lord.
paid a lot to get him.
But yeah, I'm gonna do it. I'm going over. I think they just have to. They have to.
So I am also going to go over, but I will recognize that all the arguments in my head that I'm making about the over are the exact same things I would have said last year, which is like, they've got to be better. We know they want to be better. We know they're going to try. They can't tank again. This would be year 5 of tanking. They're not going to do that. So it's all the same. Honestly, if they had
JD Bickerstaff, he's a good coach. He did some good things in Cleveland.
You know
Just
what I
ignore
will
the
say about
Houston
JB
year, or-
Bickerstaff? That Cavs team was really good when everyone got hurt, and
Yeah.
so he did really well with a lack of talent. And so maybe he can transfer that to this Pistons team. I will say, if they had kept Monty Williams, I would have gone under. No, there's no chance I'm going over with Monty Williams based on what I saw last year. You know what's so crazy though is like I really believe that, because I watched way too much Pistons last year because I was really excited about the streak. I really think he cost them like legitimately 3 to 4 losses. And in fact, there's a stat on Cleaning the Glass, which is win differential, which is the difference between the number of games the team won versus what would be expected based on their efficiency. And one of the teams that's at the top there is Detroit. Theoretically, they should have won they were more like an 18 to 20 win team. So if you think about it that way, that like they just had this season from hell, they were
You've got to go
more
over.
of like an 18 to 20 win team. Can they get 5 wins from just bringing in some bad shooters, but still shooters, which is more they could say last year. So
yeah,
I'm
they
going
still
over
have tons of. They have questions, about what's Jalen Duren's long-term fit. What's Jay Nivey? I mean, they still got a lot of things they're working out, but they at least look more like a semblance of a team. They obviously got rid of Troy Reaver, brought in Trajan Langdon. Like they're going in a direction that is trying to be more positive. And I think part of that, and I know Cade's going to be locked in, or he's already locked in with a incredible extension, but I'm like, you've got to at least show this guy that everybody talked about him. I think y'all mentioned it when you did the redraft. It was like he was not quite Luka level, but like a elite level prospect coming in to the NBA draft. And you've got to show him that because I can't imagine he would stay at the first opportunity to leave if for 5 years you haven't been able to put a team that's won 24 games on the floor.
And to his credit, he was much better last season because his
He
first
just can't
2
do it by
seasons
himself.
He can't. And so hopefully the one thing that does worry me a little bit though is I do think they're going to be awful defensively. Jalen Duren was really bad defensively, and a lot of these guys they brought in, other than like Ron Holland, and we'll see how much Paul Reed plays, but like Malik Beasley, Tim Hardaway Jr., really bad defenders. So they're going to have to get better offensively. Like last year, let's see, they were 28th in offense, 25th in defense. They need to be like a league average offense.
Yeah.
And
like 15,
because I
14,
think they're going to be really bad defensively.
Yeah, 30 defensively, 14 offensively. That's how you get to 25 wins.
Yeah. By the way, that stat, win differential, what's the gap between what you did versus what was expected? The team that had the biggest gap, any guesses? Between what their record was and what they should have theoretically won based on some of their stats.
So it would be more than it was.
So they won less.
Not a team
than
that it's
have.
not a. Yeah. Okay.
Jay's closing his eyes.
For some reason, I went to like Boston. Boston could have won 70.
That's incorrect.
Okay. Well, I figured it was. I was like,
it was actually a team we've already talked about. The Houston
Rockets.
Yeah. Which is, another argument for their over.
Yeah.
Their expected wins would have been 46, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
On the flip side, the teams that won more than they probably should have. Number one there,
Oklahoma City.
No, I think
Where's
Oklahoma State's-
OKC on that?
Oh, you know what? Actually, OKC did win fewer than they should have. Their expected wins would have been 59.4.
Oh wow,
They won 57 games. I bet
there was
we
just
could,
so many of those games where they had 25-point deficits in the first half, and just were like, yeah, we'll just mosey our way to a win.
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, I could probably think of a few games that they shouldn't have lost. But we don't want to think about bad things. So let's go to our next team. This is a very difficult one. The San Antonio Spurs. So their over-under came in high. 35.5. That to me is a little crazy. I get it, but it's a little crazy. They won 22 games last year, 22-60. Their over-under last year was 28.5. Their key additions, Chris Paul, Stephon Castle, Harrison Barnes, Malachi Flynn, Brandon Boston Jr. Their key losses, Julian Champagnie, Chetty Osman, and Doug McDermott. So the argument for the over, if you really wanted to take the over, which means that they would need to win 14 more games than they won last year. Post All-Star break, they were 11-16, which is a 33 win pace. During that time, so that was a 27 game stretch, they were the 11th ranked defense in the league. And they did that by being third in free throw rate. So they just did not allow opponents to get to the line. They were also fourth in defensive rebound percentage. They allowed the lowest percentage of corner threes and the second lowest percentage of just overall threes. Also during that time, they were 23rd in offense. So the kind of picture of this team going forward, if you wanted to take the over, I think, is them becoming like a top 10 defense with Wemby being like a defensive player of the year, which is very realistic because he was second in defensive player of the year last year. And then them just being like the 20th ranked offense. Like if they were like the 7th ranked, in fact, Houston last year, 7th ranked defense, 20th ranked offense, and they won 41 games. So I think that is the recipe for them to hit the over on this. Honestly, though, I just hate their roster. I would be interested in asking a Spurs fan, how many of these guys are you more than 75% confident are going to be on the next good Spurs team? Because
3?
I
Stephon
think most
Castle,
people would probably say Vassell and Wemby. I think a lot of people are going to say Jeremy Sohan, which we'll see. So maybe you go 4. Chris Paul is so old. Harrison Barnes, another one of those Tobias Harris guys, where the fan base for the Kings, they weren't shedding any tears. When,
they
Harrison
lit the
Barnes
beam
left.
when he left, I think.
They probably did. Yeah. So he's definitely a name. We've seen him do great things, but I don't know if it really matters that much. I don't like this team. I still think they have so much to figure out with their young guys. Another argument, though, for the over is that they kind of punted on the first 2 months of last season by doing that point Sohan. And now not only do they have Trey Jones, who they started, I looked it up, they started him January 4th on, but now they also have Chris Paul. So they have point guards. They're going into the season planning to play point guards. And they also have Stephon Castle, which I know he wants to be a point guard. So we'll see what happens there. So they did punt. Maybe this was more, in fact, I think their win differential, they were more like a 26 win team last year. So kind of interesting.
So what do you think about I think Andrew had mentioned this early on. It's they're going to have problem with spacing. They don't have, Stephon Castle's not a shooter. Harrison Barnes, I don't think he's really a shooter. He's going to shoot. He's kind of like Tobias Harris. Chris Paul, if you depend on Chris Paul, I guess, for much more than 40 to 50 games this year. But
yeah, I think the big
Vassell, obviously, but Sohan is another one of you guys. He can't shoot. So you have 2 of your young stars that we just identified can't shoot.
Yeah, and I think it's those 2. You need one of those to come through. And I'll be interested to see how much they play those guys together. And I'm interested to see who they start. I'm assuming. Well, I don't know. Maybe they will start Castle. I was kind of thinking going in, they'll bring Chris Paul off the bench. Maybe they'll start Trey Jones and Vassell again, and then bring like Stephon Castle and CP3 off the bench. But maybe they start Castle from the jump, which I think would be pretty fun. But yeah, I'm interested to see how they manage that, because those are two guys that they are going to play a lot of minutes. And what we know right now is that they are kind of non-shooters.
Yeah, and I think that this is you go with the over just if you're anticipating what really apparently the odds makers are anticipating is that Wemby gets into like another stratosphere of his ability, right? Like where he's
I think that's
the person.
Yeah, that's why that's so high, because if they had it any lower, you can make the Wemby argument like very quickly and talk yourself into like 34 wins.
Yep.
So I'm going to go
what
under.
Are you going with under?
I'm going under. Yeah,
because that's one of your that would be one of your surprise teams for sure. Like a 13 win improvement from the year before.
It's based on your over under, and you have to get 10 more wins than that. So that would mean they'd have to win 47 games.
It's not
46 games.
Yeah, that's not.
So yeah, if the Spurs win 46, very impressive.
Yeah, very.
Yeah, I mean, all those things I said about them, punting the first 2 months, they're really good post All-Star break. They have they have the structure of a top 10 defense, basically just because they have Wemby, and also like Stephon Castle's really good defensively.
Yeah,
Vassell's going to be good defensively. Sohan's going to be good defensively. This will be
like the opposite of the Pistons, where it's like they're going to need to. I mean, they'll be top 5 defense maybe at times, but it's like they may be a 20 to 25 offense.
And that was kind of the, not criticism, but just like the observation about Wemby in the Olympics was like, yeah, his defense is kind of like already there. It's good to go. This guy's ready. He can be defensive player of the year. He's probably the defensive player of the year favorite for this upcoming season, but his offense still has a ways to go. Some of those games, I think he was like 4-17 in like the semifinal game. So, yeah, I'm going to go under, but most of that is just based on the Western Conference. Because I just don't see how all these teams are going to be so good and where all those wins are going to come from. They have to play each other. So I am going to take the over or the under on the Spurs. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think it's too many games. I'm not ready for them to take that step.
Too many games. Now, we've talked about a lot of bad teams today. All bad teams. But don't worry. We're going to end with 2 good Western Conference teams. First one is one that Jay picked. The New Orleans Pelicans, who have an over-under of 46.5. Last season, they won 49 games. 49 games. They could lose 2 games, still go over. Their over-under last year was 44.5. Their key additions, they traded for DeJounte Murray. They drafted Yves Missy. They got Daniel Tice. They lost Dyson Daniels, Najee Marshall, Larry Nance Jr., and Jonas Valanciunas. Reading out those names, like those guys played some minutes for them.
Yeah,
may I say. In fact, I forgot to write this down, but I was looking at their most played minutes from last season. And in their top 9, 4 of those guys are the guys I just mentioned. So like all of Larry Nance, Najee Marshall, Dyson Daniels, Jonas Valanciunas, all those guys played 1,200 minutes plus. Jonas Valanciunas almost played 2,000 minutes. So you're taking out all of those guys. You're putting in mainly DeJounte Murray, and then we'll see what happens at center.
Because they got rid of Larry Nance, right? Didn't you say he's with the Hawks, isn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, their starting center is either Daniel Tice or a rookie.
Or Zion.
Right now. Or, I suppose.
He did.
Zion, who's apparently like in the best shape of his life and is super skinny now. So I don't even know if like you want him playing center.
I remember. Do you remember that a couple years ago when Jokic it was like, he got skinny? It's like, I don't know. It's just the right camera angle, apparently.
I heard Zion talked about it, and he said his actual weight. He said he's like lower than he was at Duke.
Man, that'd be awesome.
Crazy.
for him and for the Pelicans, but they have some roster issues. What's going on with Brandon Ingram?
So this is why I'm just like, I almost wish they didn't have an over-under. Like, I wish they'd take it off the board, because this isn't like a team. Like, this is so unfinished. I don't understand how you can even make a pick, because they're obviously not done. They're not going to do this, are they? They're really going to not only play like Brandon Ingram, DeJounte Murray, which, by the way, DeJounte Murray in my mind is like guard Brandon Ingram. And then you're playing CJ McCollum.
That's pretty good.
You're playing Zion. Once again, not playing Trey Murphy III. Like, they haven't cleared the space for Trey Murphy to actually be a starter unless they're going to bring CJ off the bench. I feel like this team has so much more work to be done. And it is as simple as them trading Brandon Ingram for a center, but it just doesn't seem like that's going to happen. I mean, for a while, they talked about the idea of trading him for Jared Allen, but he got the extension, so he's not eligible to be traded, I believe. The latest name, listening to Game Theory, just that bringing this up as like an idea, would be trading for DeAndre Ayton. Yeah, like I don't think there's
I
like
get
a great
but
option
I'm like,
out there. He would be better than what they have,
for sure.
and
So who are the centers in Charlotte? I know they have Mark Williams from Duke. Is there a second one?
Mark Williams, Nick
No,
Richards.
because they got rid of Kai Jones.
Yeah.
I'm like, is there anybody that has? I mean, it would have been Detroit last year, right? Like, not that you would wanted James Weissman or Beef
Or
Stew.
Marvin
Maybe
Bagley.
Beef Stew.
Yeah, but he doesn't feel like a full-time center to me.
Yeah.
Listen, they're not going to
find
find like Chet or Miles Turner. They're not going to find like a stretch center that's also good defensively. Those guys are so rare. So maybe someone like Ayton, who at least his game is more like mid-range based.
Yeah.
So maybe that would free up the paint a little bit for, Point Zion or even for DeJounte Murray. So maybe that's something. I don't really know if you're Portland why you want to bring Brandon Ingram, though, because you just traded for Denny Avdia, who's going to be your starting three. I doubt they want to give Brandon Ingram some huge deal next summer. And honestly, I don't even know if they can trade for him, but they might actually push them into the tax because I know that they're
Portland
close to the tax.
Yeah,
they were close to the tax before they traded like Brogdon. So yeah, I just don't know what to do with the Pelicans.
like a Nick.
I think they're an objectively worse team than they were last year. Not necessarily because of talent, but just because of how this all fits together.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Like, not having a center to protect Zion is. They use Jonas like throwback 1990s big for large parts of the season, especially in the playoffs against the Thunder, which obviously didn't work. So maybe they're trying to zag a little bit, but I'm like, you have to do something with this roster. And I think DeJounte Murray, I don't honestly, he's like the guy I probably think the least about in this whole like, oh, is it gonna the Lakers gonna get DeJounte Murray? Is he gonna be the difference maker for them? And I'm just like, I don't. He was a good defender for the Spurs, and I think a lot of potential. But how good is he? Like, that's what I don't know. Like, I don't know how good DeJounte Murray is, and if he's a mediocre point guard-ish kind of hybrid, then I mean, I just think you're probably close to where you were. So I probably would go right under. Like, I think you're still a playoff team, depending on health, or a play-in team. But man,
yeah, DeJounte, he's in this class of player for me that is like, they're clearly good. They're obviously good. They're deserving of their contract, and yet you don't really want those players on that contract. And Brandon Ingram is like that too, where it's like you just wish they were in the role below that, but because of the way their career has gone, they've always been the guy. I mean, DeJounte was the guy in San Antonio, and then he was playing with Trey, and Brandon Ingram was pretty much always the guy in his career. You just kind of get used to them being that and playing that role, so you have to continue treating them that way. And so, like, I think they're good players, but in their current role, like, I just don't. You're not going anywhere with Brandon Ingram as like your number one. I don't even think you're going anywhere with Brandon Ingram as your number two. And I feel the same way about DeJounte Murray. So I don't know.
What about like a Orlando for Ingram?
I
mean, it's
see,
more
I
mid-range.
don't like that because
less shooting.
Yeah, I just feel
Plus,
like
is he
there's so
take
much.
Franz's spot or Paolo's?
There's so
Obviously
much.
not.
I think there's too much overlap between all of those guys.
Yeah,
just in terms of like how they want to play. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know who like even if they play out this season and Brandon Ingram's on the team for the whole season, I don't know who the team is next year, like next summer, that's giving him this big deal. I can't really figure it out.
Not get it.
Miami
maybe is what another one, like, who just throws money at guys sometimes. I don't know, and he could probably fix part of his career, but which is sad. I don't think Brandon's a bad player. It's just he's just awkward in this modern NBA.
Yeah, he's just not. He's not good enough to be the type of player that he plays as. Like he. I mean, you know, he always got the comparisons to KD because they're like these tall, lanky guys, and they had somewhat similar games. Although Ingram was never willing to shoot threes the way KD was. But like, if you're gonna have a player play in that role, like they really do have to be a superstar. Like they have to be the best of the best. And if they're anything less than that, it's just not worth it. And so, yeah, I don't know what team's going to do it. This was really interesting to me on Cleaning the Glass, looking at the on-offs. There were only 4 players on the Pelicans who had a positive on-off. And it was Jose Alvarado, Trey Murphy III, Najee Marshall, and Herb Jones, which I just thought that was funny because it's kind of like the reverse Jokic thing where, you know, like the starters are always so good in Denver and then the bench is terrible, kind of because the starters are so good. And it's kind of the opposite in New Orleans where the starters
are the better ones. Yeah.
Yeah, like their starters last year were a net negative with Valanciunas. So again, like I understand why they wanted to move on. Also don't understand why the Wizards wanted Valanciunas, but their starters were a net negative, and so their bench as a result was really good. I just don't think you can go into another year without letting Trey Murphy be the player that like we think he could be. He at least needs to be a starter. So I think I'm going to go under 2. The caveat being even if they traded for like DeAndre Ayton, I might go over just because I think it would make their roster make more sense. If they just trade for just a solid starting center, I think I would go over because I really do like Zion. I like Trey Murphy III. I think DeJounte can be fine, but until they have a starting center, I just can't buy into this team.
Yeah.
Which brings us to a team, our final team, Jay. We're doing great on time. 52 minutes. Look at us go. Final team, and this is a big one. Team that has no concerns about their centers because they have 2 of them. The Dallas Mavericks, the hated Dallas Mavericks, whose over-under is 50.5. Last season, they were 50-32. Their over-under was 45.5. Key additions, Klay Thompson, the aforementioned Najee Marshall, Quentin Grimes. Key losses, Derek Jones Jr., I would say is key loss. Josh Green, Tim Hardaway Jr., are they really key losses? I was actually really interested at, I was looking at on-offs and looking at Josh Green. They were so bad defensively when he was on the court. And I didn't watch enough Mavs to know if he's really that bad of a defender, but it was kind of shocking to me how much worse they were on defense when he was on the court. Maybe he played with a certain group of players that just weren't good defensively. I don't think of him as being that awful defensively, but he was like in the 4th percentile of that stat. So the things to know about the Mavs, they were 21-9 after the trade deadline. And if you want to make another case for them going over, prior to that trade deadline, they hadn't really had a good season. It was kind of a mess. They were dealing with a ton of injuries. For the season, they had 35 different starting lineups. So they went through a lot in that first half, and then post All-Star break, they make those trades, everything comes together. They make the run to the finals. The big addition, because, like Najee Marshall, I do like him. He had a career year from 3 last year, but I don't want to like overrate him too much. It'd be like if someone was talking about the Thunder and spending a lot of time talking about Aaron Wiggins. Like, as much as I like Aaron Wiggins, ultimately I don't think he's going to be the difference between this team, like being great or not. However, I do think Clay could swing their season, because the whole idea with Clay in Golden State was that he was feeling disrespected. They weren't giving him a contract extension. And at some point during last season, now he wasn't even a starter. Now he was coming off the bench, which clearly he was pissed about. I have to assume he went to Dallas in part because they could offer him a starting role. And I'm just really interested to see how Jason Kidd deals with that as the season goes on. Like when they get into crunch time, is he really going to play Luka, Kyrie, and Clay? Because in the playoffs, I do think that could be a problem. Clay, I was mentioning with Josh Green, but for the Warriors, when he was on the floor last year, they were really bad defensively. They gave up 4.8 more points per 100 possessions when he was on the court, which is in the 14th percentile. That is the part of his game. Because you look at his offensive stats, like he can still shoot. He shot like 39% from 3. I think he shot like 40% from the corners. Like he can still shoot. But clearly the other end of the floor is where we've seen that big drop off. So like in the playoffs, are they really going to play those 3 guys? Because I think that could leave them really vulnerable in a way they weren't last season. Because even though, well, part of that was because Derek Jones Jr. and PJ Washington just decided to shoot the lights out. But it's also because Derek Jones Jr. and PJ Washington were like really solid defenders for them in those series. So I'm going over. I am going to pick Dallas to win more than 50 games. But I do wonder if their additions are not going to really matter in the regular season in terms of them still being able to be a really good team, but might show up more in the playoffs. I just really want to see how this Clay thing plays out. And I'm sure what Mavs fans would say is like, we've seen you can put a lot of guys around Luka and suddenly they are like the best versions of their role player form. And Clay is probably like one of the greatest role players of all time. So if he can just play that role in a Luka offense, you could imagine him having a very good offensive season at least. But I do still wonder how that is going to affect them in the playoffs.
So my only rebuttal to something like that is like, it wasn't like he was playing in some clunky offense in Golden State where he wasn't getting opportunities. Like the Warriors clearly identified that he was slowing down and trying to figure out what to do. And if they wanted to keep him, they could have. I mean, maybe not. Maybe he was hurt enough to where he was done. But I just think, I think putting all of your kind of expectations for the ceiling that your team has on Klay Thompson's ability to, I don't know, contribute on the defensive end, and because for me, you're saying it like, so it's Lively, PJ Washington, probably Clay, then Kyrie and Luka. And Kyrie was fantastic defensively in the playoffs, like at least in the Thunder series. Like he worked his tail off. If I was a Mavericks fan, I'd be a little nervous about how much his body handles that, because he's put a lot of miles, a lot of minutes on his body, and he has a past history of injuries. But you're right. I mean, I think so. Then your expectation is, are you going to put Clay on the bench for Najee Marshall? Is that what? Because that's what you hear people saying. There's this weird,
which probably
Twitter
makes sense.
Underground. There's like Twitter anti, like the Mavericks hate the Thunder, and now the Thunder. I mean, it makes sense, but they're like, oh, who cares about Derek Jones being gone? Because now we have Najee Marshall. I'm like, I mean, it doesn't feel like they were the same level of defender in the 2 series. We played both of them.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think that I would agree with what you said. I think that their regular season win total will exceed the over under. I think their playoff ceiling will be a little bit lower because of that.
And part of that is I just think other teams in the West have gotten better. Actually, I think our team, the Oklahoma State Thunder, has gotten significantly better.
And I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued with the Mavs about Derek Lively. Like, I think he's the key that kind of unlocks what they could potentially be. And there's just a lot of, is he shooting threes? Is he doing, there's all of that stuff, which happens to every big for every team ever. But it's like, what can he become defensively? Can he be enough of a menace where you can take some more risks and not feel as vulnerable on the perimeter if you have a big guy that can really protect the paint the way that Lively did at moments, at least against the Thunder. But
it's not the same.
I don't know.
It's like it's obviously a level below Chet, but Lively does have that thing where you do kind of forget that he's a rookie and like he's going to get better, and you kind of don't factor that in. But because he was so fully formed as a rookie, but yeah, he's going to get better. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to mention, so the guys they got rid of were all negatives for them last year in terms of on-off. Like even Derek Jones Jr., a minus 1.2. Tim Hardaway Jr., minus 5.6. Josh Green, minus 7.2. They got rid of Grant Williams already. He was a minus 9.4 in 1,200 minutes last year. He was terrible for them. So they have done a good job of kind of like shedding some of these guys who just weren't working when they were on the court, at least last year for them.
Can you pull up, how quick can you pull up what their on-off was in the playoffs?
Let's see her. Okay, in 162 minutes, Tim Hardaway Jr. was a minus 23.9, second percentile. This one is the one that I feel like a lot of people did not realize in the moment, but was absolutely true. Daniel Gafford was a minus 14.8 in 445 minutes.
Yeah.
Compare that to Derek Lively. In basically the same number of minutes was a plus 13. It was like Gafford was terrible.
Yeah,
but Lively, it didn't seem like it to a lot of people in the moment because he was still getting his stats. And then Dante Exum was a minus 10 in 117 minutes.
What about Josh Green?
He was minus 0.9, so he's just kind of enough.
I don't know. I just feel like he played well against the Thunder, and that's I base it all on those 6 games that we played against them, and it felt like everybody there was like the best version of themselves. So it's hard for me to grade them probably fairly.
Let me take a look at. Oh wow, I'd never looked at the on-offs for the Thunder in the playoffs. I didn't realize. I mean, Chet was a plus 18.2 in his 344 minutes, and Jay Will was a minus 27.9.
Yeah.
In his 116 minutes. Probably the most shocking one was Isaiah Joe was minus 9.7 in his 172 minutes.
Yeah, I'm not trying to live that whole thing, but game 4, was it game 4 or game 5? Game 5 back here in Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
And when they put Joe in the starting lineup, I mean, he missed, it felt like he was 2 of 10 from the 3-point line. Like it was not what you wanted from him in that game. And anyway, but I don't know. I don't want to believe that anybody got good or better this offseason outside of the Thunder. So
yeah, it's crazy. He shot. Do you know what Isaiah Joe shot in the playoffs from 3?
The whole both series?
Yeah, 10 games.
37?
41%. But I get what you're saying. Like it did feel in the moment like he was
can't
missing.
make anything. It's like, actually, still a pretty elite 3-point line shooter.
Yeah. All right, so that's another 6. We're just cruising through these. I'll be back next Wednesday with Andrew, I assume.
Unless he's gallivanting around the world again.
Yeah. Good for him, though. Good for him. Bad for us. Bad for me. I'm not getting to do anything. I had to work 16 hours yesterday. It was miserable. Okay, so we'll see you all on Friday. I'm assuming you guys, there is still going to be a Fry Pod, right?
Yeah, I think it's Luke, Taylor, and maybe Andrew. I think that's right.
Okay. Well, until next time.
Or just Luke and Taylor.
No, Andrew would never allow that. He would truly never allow that.
Yeah.
He'll sometimes allow me and Luke and Taylor to do, but we have to like essentially beg for it. We have to bring it up multiple times in the text thread before he'll even willing to consider it.
Yeah. That's
I could see him sending.
That's
Luke
what I want on Patreon.
Yeah, that's what the people would pay for.
That's what we pay for.
Luke and Taylor just being nasty. I could see Andrew sending them like a fake StreamYard link and have them
go over here. It's great. Check that one out.
record it. All right. Well, thanks for everyone who joined us tonight, and we'll see you guys on Friday.